Hello, people of Grace. Today I want to talk about Jacob's Ladder. And this is a bit of an introduction for the sermon that will be preached this upcoming Sunday, May 16th. But I want to draw a few things out from this story. Number one, God often shows up when we are most vulnerable. You may be familiar with the story of Jacob's Ladder. It's in Genesis 27 and 28, but especially chapter 28, verses 10 through 16. But in those chapters, Jacob has just stolen Esau's blessing. He had previously stolen Esau's birthright. And now Esau is furious and just starts plotting to kill Jacob once Isaac has passed away. Well, word gets to Jacob about that, ultimately through his mother, and Jacob flees for his life. And he's out in the wilderness alone and vulnerable and brought to the end of himself when God shows up through this vision of Jacob's ladder. And Jacob is a lot like us. Jacob was a schemer, he was a thinker, he was a plotter. He figured out how to get what he wanted in life. He was ambitious and willing even, to cut some corners, maybe cheat a little bit to get there. And where did that get him? That got him fleeing for his life alone in the wilderness. And when he comes to the end of all his thoughts and his plans and his dreams and his schemes, and he's most vulnerable, God shows up. And that's so much like us. As long as we've got everything under control, we're just not usually very open to the presence of God. But God does show up in Jacob's vulnerability, and he sees this vision of a ladder connecting heaven and earth with angels ascending and descending on it. And God speaks to him in the vision and basically says, I've got your back, Jacob. I'm going to take care of you. You're going to be blessed. You're going to have many descendants. I'm going to fulfill my promises that I first made to Abraham through you. And Jacob wakes up and he says, this is a fearful place. Surely this is the gateway to heaven. In other words, God shows up when we are vulnerable. In our own way, we appreciate that, but then we tend to associate God with our profound experiences. Those experiences could be something like what Jacob had, which is truly miraculous, or it could simply be a piece of music, or even a certain form or style of music. It could be a sanctuary where we often prayed as a child. It could be our favorite spot in nature. And we feel like that place is sacred. But if you stop and think about it, Jacob thought this place was sacred, and he said, this is a fearful place. Surely this is the gateway to heaven. And he built an altar there, and he renamed it Bethel, which means house of God. But was it the house of God? It was good that Jacob built an altar and that he remembered that experience. But think about it, from Jacob's day till now, including possibly even Jacob himself after this event, years later when he came back to the Promised Land, how many humans have wandered through that spot and it's just a spot? Nothing special. You don't necessarily see God there. We associate God with our profound experiences, but really any place can be the gateway to heaven. There was nothing special about Bethel, except that God showed up there in a way that Jacob could perceive. But it really wasn't the place. It isn't really the bush that was burning that Moses encountered. It was the fire that could burn the bush without it being consumed. It was never really the temple that Solomon built or that was rebuilt. When John tours the New Jerusalem, there is no temple because the Lamb is its temple and we, through Christ, are its temple. Any place can be what Jacob called this place, which he called Bethel, and said it was a gateway to heaven. Any place can be the gateway to heaven. And what's really amazing is that ultimately, Jesus is Jacob's ladder. Jesus is the gateway to heaven. God uniquely shows up in the human Jesus of Nazareth. And Jesus himself tells us this through the story of his calling of Nathanael, when Nathanael is stunned and overwhelmed because of things that Jesus said to him, and Jesus then said, Does this amaze you? What if I told you that you will see angels ascending and descending as they ascended and descended on Jacob's ladder? What if you see angels ascending and descending on the Son of Man, on Jesus? Jesus is Jacob's ladder. As Colossians 2:8-9 says, in Christ, the fullness of the deity dwells in bodily form, and heaven visits earth. With Jesus, who was a common man, just like Bethel was a common place, everything is sacred. Without him, nothing is. The apostles had these encounters with Jesus where they would interact with him as a normal man, because Jesus in many ways was a normal man. But then occasionally they would have encounters like when they had the great catch of fish and Peter said, depart from me, I'm a sinful man. Or when they saw him calm the storm with a word. And they would have a very similar reaction to what Jacob had with his dream, because God shows up in common places. And God is everywhere. We just don't always experience him everywhere. But we can grow in that area, because with Jesus, everything is sacred. He makes the connection. He makes humanity sacred in him, because God becomes man. With Jesus, everything is sacred. Without him, nothing is. Chase after Jesus, practice his presence, and experience God in the mundane times, because that can be a sacred moment. And when we see those sacred moments, we see who God made us to be, practicing and enjoying his presence forever. And that is an encouraging thought. Celebrate Jesus, the sacred God who became man. Have a blessed day.